Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. It's a warm summer evening in 1978. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. You're sitting in the back seat of your family's station wagon, windows rolled down, the smell of popcorn and hot dogs wafting through the air. Around you, rows and rows of cars are lined up, all facing a massive white screen that towers against the darkening sky. The speaker hanging from your window crackles to life, and suddenly, you're transported into another world. This was the magic of drive-in theaters, an experience that defined American entertainment for decades and created memories that still warm the hearts of those who lived through them. Today, we live in an era of unprecedented convenience. Netflix offers us thousands of movies at the touch of a button. We can pause, rewind, and watch from the comfort of our beds. Yet, something essential has been lost in this transition from communal outdoor cinema to isolated streaming. This isn't just nostalgia talking. The drive-in theater experience represented something fundamentally different from what we have today. It was about more than just watching a movie. It was a ritual, an event, a social gathering, and an adventure all rolled into one. It was about the journey as much as the destination, about the anticipation as much as the feature presentation. Remember when going to see a movie was actually an occasion? In the 70s and 80s, you didn't just scroll through an endless menu and click play. You planned, you prepared, you got excited. The week would start with checking the newspaper's entertainment section to see what was playing at your local drive-in. There it was, printed in black and white, this weekend's double feature. Maybe it was a new horror movie paired with a science fiction thriller, or perhaps a comedy followed by an action adventure. The drive-in always gave you two movies for the price of one, and that alone made it feel like you were getting away with something special. Then came the planning phase. If you were a teenager, you'd call your friends from the landline in your kitchen, the cord stretching as far as it would go for some privacy. Are you going to the drive-in on Saturday? The answer was usually yes, because the drive-in wasn't just about the movies. It was the place to be, the social hub of teenage life. Families would plan their evening differently. Mom might pack a cooler with sodas and snacks, even though everyone knew you'd end up buying something from the concession stand anyway. The smell of that popcorn was too irresistible. Dad would wash the car, not because it needed to be clean to watch a movie, but because there was a certain pride in pulling into the drive-in lot with a freshly waxed vehicle. As the day of the drive-in trip approached, the excitement built. You'd think about the movie you were going to see, maybe discuss it with friends at school, speculate about the plot, argue about which movie in the double feature would be better. This anticipation was part of the magic. You couldn't just satisfy your curiosity instantly. You had to wait, and that waiting made the eventual experience so much sweeter. The drive to the drive-in theater was its own adventure. These theaters were rarely located in the heart of town. They needed space, lots of it, so they were typically built on the outskirts, along highways, or in semi-rural areas. This meant that getting there required a journey, usually 15 to 30 minutes of driving through changing landscapes as you left the suburbs behind. As you drove, you'd watch the sun set through the car window. The sky would transform from blue to gold to pink to deep purple. By the time you arrived, twilight would be settling in, that magical time between day and night when the world seemed suspended in possibility. The first glimpse of the drive-in screen rising above the trees or appearing beyond a hill always triggered a thrill of excitement. That enormous white rectangle, standing tall against the darkening sky, was your beacon, your destination, your portal to another world. Then came the entrance. You'd pull up to the ticket booth, a small building with a window where a teenager or a bored-looking adult would take your money. The tickets were simple, often just colored stubs that you'd keep as souvenirs. The person in the booth might tell you which rows had the best remaining spots, or warn you that it was filling up fast. Driving through the entrance, you'd navigate slowly through the lot, looking for the perfect spot. This was a skill, almost an art form. You wanted to be close enough to see well, but not so close that the screen loomed overwhelmingly above you. You wanted a spot with a good angle, where you wouldn't have a tall vehicle blocking your view. Some families preferred the back rows, where kids could play on the small playground equipment. Many drive-ins featured near the concession stand. Once you found your spot, the real preparations began. Dad would position the car just right, then grab the speaker from the post between parking spaces. These speakers were metal boxes, heavy and utilitarian, with a coiled cord and a hook that you'd hang on your partially rolled down window. The speaker had 2 volume knobs, one for each channel, and finding the right volume was crucial. Too loud, and you'd disturb your viewing experience. Too soft, and you'd miss dialogue. Some drive-ins, especially in the later years, broadcast the audio on AM radio frequencies, which was an improvement in sound quality, but somehow less charming. There was something authentic about that crackling speaker, the way it made movie dialogue sound simultaneously distant and intimate. Before the movie started, the drive-in lot was alive with activity. This was the social hour, the time when the drive-in revealed itself as more than just an outdoor cinema, but as a genuine community space. Families would set up for the evening. Some people brought lawn chairs and set them up in front of their cars. Others opened their trunks and sat on the tailgate. Kids would run between cars, playing tag or throwing frisbees, enjoying their freedom in this unique outdoor evening environment. Parents would chat with neighbors they recognized from previous visits, catching up on life while keeping half an eye on their roaming children. The concession stand was the social epicenter. Unlike the sterile, corporate concession stands of modern multiplex theaters, drive-in concession stands were wonderful, chaotic places. They were often housed in a building beneath or near the screen, with a long counter and harried staff working to serve hundreds of customers during the narrow window before the movie started. The menu was simple but perfect. Popcorn in bags or buckets, hot dogs that had been rotating on those metal rollers for who knows how long, nachos with that impossibly orange cheese, candy bars, sodas in paper cups with crushed ice. The prices seemed high compared to bringing your own snacks, but there was something special about concession stand food. It tasted different, better somehow, flavored with nostalgia and occasion. The line at the concession stand was where teenagers flirted, where friends made plans for after the movie, where strangers struck up conversations about which film they were most excited to see. It was a cross-section of your community. Families with young children, dating couples, groups of teenagers, elderly couples who'd been coming to this same drive-in for 30 years. Back at the car, with snacks distributed and everyone settled in, you'd watch the lot continue to fill. Car after car would pull in, each finding their spot, hanging their speakers, settling in for the evening. There was something communal about this gathering. Hundreds of people coming together with a shared purpose, but each in their own private space. As darkness fell more completely, the atmosphere would change. The running and playing would wind down. Families would return to their cars. Lawn chairs would be folded up. The chattering would quiet. A sense of anticipation would settle over the lot, like the darkness settling over the land. Before the main features, drive-ins would show a series of pre-recorded segments on the screen. These were their own form of entertainment, and for many people, they were as memorable as the movies themselves. First came the countdown. Some drive-ins used elaborate animated countdowns featuring cartoon characters or abstract designs. Others kept it simple, with numbers appearing on the screen, accompanied by upbeat music. But the countdown served its purpose. It let everyone know the show was about to start and gave late arrivals a chance to get settled. Then came the legendary concession stand advertisements. These animated shorts were delightfully cheesy and have since become iconic representations of drive-in culture. You'd see cartoon hot dogs dancing across the screen, singing about how delicious they were. Popcorn boxes would bounce along to catchy jingles. Sodas would fizz and bubble with exaggerated enthusiasm. These ads were so over the top, so earnestly trying to sell you food you'd already bought, that they became part of the charm. Many drive-ins would also show local business advertisements. The hardware store downtown would have a simple slide showing their hours and services. The local diner would advertise their breakfast special. The car dealership would showcase their new models. These ads were time capsules of local commerce, reminding you that the drive-in was woven into the fabric of the community. There might be public service announcements too, reminders to lock your car, information about upcoming community events, notices about the playground rules for children. Some drive-ins would show actual newsreels or cartoon shorts, especially if they catered to family audiences. All of this pre-show content is almost entirely absent from the Netflix experience. There's no build-up, no warm-up act, no sense of communal advertising and community messaging. You go straight from browsing to watching, with nothing to ease you into the experience or create that sense of place and time. When the feature presentation finally began, something magical happened. That enormous screen flickered to life, and suddenly you were transported. But you were also still very much present in your physical space, and that combination created a unique viewing experience. Drive-in screens were massive, often 60 to 90 feet wide. When you're sitting in a car 50 to 100 feet away, that screen fills your field of vision. The images were larger than life, almost overwhelming in their scale. A close-up of an actor's face would be the size of a building. An explosion would seem to consume the entire world. But unlike a modern indoor theater where the screen is all you see, at a drive-in you are always aware of your surroundings. In your peripheral vision, you could see other cars, silhouetted against the glow of the screen. You could see stars in the sky above. If you glanced to the side, you'd see the distant lights of the highway or the town. This meant you were simultaneously immersed in the movie and grounded in reality. You were in two places at once, the fictional world on the screen and the very real summer night around you. The audio from the speaker added to this unique experience. It wasn't the pristine surround sound of modern theaters. It was tinny, slightly distorted, and somehow perfect because of those limitations. Dialogue had a peculiar quality, as if the actors were speaking directly to you through that metal box hanging on your window. Sound effects and music would crackle and buzz, adding texture to the experience. And then there were the interruptions, the moments that would never happen with Netflix. A plane would fly overhead, and you'd glance up to see its blinking lights passing through the stars. Someone would honk their horn accidentally, and the sound would echo across the lot. Kids in a nearby car would get restless and start playing with flashlights, creating brief light shows against the interior of their car. During intermission between the double feature, the lot would come alive again. People would make another run to the concession stand, lines even longer now that everyone was getting hungry for a second round of snacks. Some people would start their engines and turn on the heat if the night had grown cold. Others would roll down windows to let in more of the fresh air. Watching the second movie, you'd fight to stay awake. The lateness of the hour, the big meal, the comfortable nest you'd made in the back seat, all these would conspire to make your eyelids heavy. Some people gave in and dozed off, lulled to sleep by the murmur of movie dialogue, and the comfort of being in a car surrounded by family. Others pushed through, determined to get their money's worth and see both films. The drive-in served different purposes for different people, and this versatility was part of its magic. It was a shapeshifter of a venue, adapting to meet various social needs. For families with young children, the drive-in was a godsend. Parents could bring their kids to the movies without worrying about them disturbing other patrons. If a toddler got fussy, you could step out of the car and walk them around. If they fell asleep, you could let them doze in the back seat while you finished watching the movie. The drive-in gave parents freedom and flexibility that indoor theaters simply couldn't match. Many families made drive-in trips a weekly ritual during summer months. It was affordable entertainment for the whole family. Kids would look forward to it all week, counting down the days. Parents appreciated having a structured activity that got everyone out of the house and didn't break the bank. The drive-in became woven into the fabric of family life, creating memories that would last for generations. For teenagers, the drive-in meant something entirely different. It was freedom. It was romance. It was the place where you could be out late with your friends or your date without being under your parents' direct supervision. The privacy of a car in a dark lot created possibilities that made hearts race and palms sweat. The drive-in date was a rite of passage. Nervous young men would wash and detail their cars, rehearse conversation starters, plan the perfect casual but not too casual outfit. Young women would prepare with equal care, knowing that a drive-in date could lead anywhere from a first kiss to a serious relationship to nothing at all. The backseat became legendary. Some couples would barely watch the movie, too caught up in each other. Others would start out watching intently and gradually let their attention drift toward each other as the evening progressed. The drive-in provided a semi-public space where private moments could unfold, chaperoned by darkness and distance. Groups of friends would pile into someone's car and make the drive-in trip a social expedition. They'd mock the bad movies, quote the good ones, throw popcorn at each other, and create inside jokes that would last for years. The movie was almost secondary to the experience of being together, being young, being free. For older couples, the drive-in offered something else: nostalgia and romance renewed. Many had gone to drive-ins on dates when they were young, and returning years later with their spouse could rekindle that old magic. The drive-in reminded them of who they'd been, of the early days of their relationship, of summer nights when the world had seemed full of infinite possibility. One of the most significant differences between drive-in theaters and Netflix is the full sensory engagement of the drive-in experience. Netflix engages primarily two senses: sight and hearing. The drive-in engaged all five. There was the visual experience, of course, but it was richer than simply watching a screen. You saw the movie, but you also saw the stars above, the silhouettes of trees against the screen's glow, the subtle movements in other cars, the moths and insects flying through the projector's beam of light. Your eyes were constantly processing layers of visual information. Sound was equally complex. You heard the movie through the speaker, but you also heard the ambient sounds of a summer night: crickets chirping, distant traffic, wind rustling through leaves, the occasional car door closing, fragments of conversation from nearby vehicles. These sounds created a soundscape that surrounded and complemented the film's audio. Smell was huge. The aroma of popcorn and hot dogs was persistent and wonderful. But beyond the concession stand smells, there were others: fresh-cut grass if you were early in the season, the smell of car interiors and upholstery, the slightly metallic scent of the speaker, bug spray if mosquitoes were bad, the smell of someone's cigarette or pipe tobacco drifting from a nearby car. Touch was part of the experience too. You felt the car seat beneath you, perhaps a blanket you'd brought for warmth. You felt the night air on your skin, cooler than the day had been, sometimes requiring a sweater or jacket as the night wore on. You felt the speaker in your hand when you adjusted the volume, cold and heavy. If you were on a date, you felt the nervous excitement of sitting close to someone you liked. Even taste played a role. The drive-in concession stand food had a distinctive flavor profile. The popcorn was always a little too salty and swimming in artificial butter. The hot dogs had that particular grilled taste from those rollers. The candy was the same brands you could buy anywhere, but somehow tasted better in this context. The soda was watered down by melting ice, but still refreshing. This multi-sensory engagement created a holistic experience that embedded itself in memory more deeply than a simple visual audio experience ever could. When people remember drive-ins, they remember the totality of the experience, all these sensory elements woven together into something that felt complete and real and alive. Here's something counterintuitive. The drive-in's imperfections were actually part of its charm. In our modern age of Netflix, we've become accustomed to perfection. Crystal clear 4 Kelvin's video, pristine surround sound, perfect subtitles if we want them, the ability to rewind if we miss something. But perfection can be sterile. It can lack character. The drive-in was wonderfully, gloriously imperfect. The image quality was often grainy, especially if you arrived late and got stuck in a back row far from the screen. The brightness would fluctuate. Sometimes the film itself would break, requiring a pause while the projectionist spliced it back together. These moments were part of the adventure. The sound from those speakers was never great. It was tinny and lacked bass. Sometimes the speaker would cut out entirely, and you'd have to call over the lot attendant to get a replacement. Sometimes the audio would be out of sync with the video, a technical problem that would be unthinkable today but was just part of the drive-in experience. Weather was the biggest wild card. You were outside, at the mercy of the elements. If it started to rain, you'd have to roll up your windows quickly, suddenly enclosed in your car with the windows fogging up. Some hardy souls would tough it out, running their wipers intermittently to clear the windshield. Others would give up and head home, disappointed but not really surprised. Weather was a risk you accepted. Insects were attracted to the screen's light and to the car's interior lights. Mosquitoes would find their way into your car if you left the windows down. Moths would fly erratically through your field of vision. Someone would inevitably shine a flashlight at the wrong moment, briefly creating shadows that blocked the screen for others nearby. These imperfections created stories. Years later, people remember the time the film broke right at the climax of the movie. They remember the night it rained so hard they could barely see the screen but decided to stay anyway. They remember fighting off mosquitoes or accidentally dropping the speaker and feeling mortified by the loud clang it made when it hit the pavement. With Netflix, there are no such stories. Everything works perfectly, or if it doesn't, you just refresh the page. There's no character, no personality, no element of unpredictability. You know exactly what you're going to get every single time. The drive-in double feature deserves its own discussion because it represented a philosophy of entertainment that has largely disappeared from our culture. For one admission price, you got 2 movies, 2 full-length feature films. This wasn't a pay extra for the premium version situation. It was standard. Everyone got the double feature. And these weren't necessarily old movies or lesser films. Drive-ins would often pair a recent hit with another popular movie, or combine genres to appeal to different audience members in the same car. The double feature created a longer, more substantial evening of entertainment. You weren't just going out for 90 minutes. You were committing to 3 to 4 hours of movie watching, plus the time before and during intermission. The drive-in became an entire evening's activity, not just a quick diversion. This length of time allowed for something important. The experience could unfold at a natural pace. There was no rush. You could settle in, relax completely, and let the evening develop organically. The first movie would warm you up, the intermission would give you a break, and the second movie would complete the experience. The pairing of movies was often interesting and sometimes odd. A comedy might be paired with a western. A horror movie might be followed by a science fiction film. Sometimes there was a thematic connection, sometimes not. This randomness exposed you to movies you might not have chosen to see on their own, broadening your cinematic experience. Compare this to Netflix, where you're expected to make individual choices for each piece of content. You watch one movie, then you're back to the menu, browsing, deciding, selecting. There's no curator making choices for you, no structure to the evening. The double feature removed choice from the equation in a way that was actually liberating. You didn't have to decide what to watch next. You knew what was coming. You could just relax and let the evening happen. Perhaps the most significant difference between drive-ins and Netflix is the nature of community and shared experience. Netflix is fundamentally isolating. You watch alone or with the few people in your immediate household. Your experience is separate from everyone else's experience. Even if thousands of people are watching the same show at the same time, you don't know them, can't see them, don't interact with them. The drive-in was communal in a very literal sense. You were physically present with hundreds of other people, all watching the same movie at the same time. You were aware of their presence. You could see their cars. You could hear occasional sounds from them. You were part of a collective experience. This physical co-presence created a sense of connection. When something funny happened on screen, you'd hear laughter rippling across the lot. When something scary happened, you'd hear scattered screams from various cars. When something moving or sad occurred, the lot would fall into a collective hush. You were experiencing the movie individually, but also as part of a group. This created a feedback loop that enhanced the experience. Comedy was funnier when you heard other people laughing. Horror was scarier when you could sense other people's tension. Drama was more powerful when you knew others were equally moved. The collective emotional response amplified individual emotional response. The drive-in was also rooted in a specific geographic community. These were your neighbors, your fellow townspeople. You might recognize cars from your street, or your church, or your workplace. This wasn't a gathering of random strangers from across a vast digital network. This was your local community coming together for a shared experience. After the movie, you'd often see the same cars that had been at the drive-in at the local diner or ice cream shop. People stopping for a late-night snack before heading home. You might talk about the movie you'd all just seen, stranger to stranger, connected by this shared experience. The drive-in created opportunities for these casual social interactions that enriched community bonds. The drive-in experience didn't end when the credits rolled. The journey home was its own distinct chapter of the evening, a transition period between the magic of the movie and the return to regular life. As the second movie ended, cars would begin starting their engines. The lot would gradually come alive with headlights, creating a strange, dreamlike atmosphere. You'd unhook the speaker and carefully hang it back on the post, making sure not to drive off with it still attached to your window, something that happened occasionally and was deeply embarrassing. Then came the slow exodus. Hundreds of cars, all trying to leave at once, meant inevitable traffic jams at the exit. You'd inch forward, surrounded by other cars, everyone patient because everyone was in the same situation. Sometimes you'd make eye contact with people in other cars, share a smile or a nod, a brief moment of acknowledgement between strangers who just shared an experience. Once out on the highway, heading back toward town, the mood in the car would be particular and distinct. If you were a kid, you'd probably be exhausted, maybe fighting sleep or already dozing. If you were a teenager, you'd be processing the evening with your friends or your date, reliving favorite moments, quoting lines, laughing about something that happened. The drive home allowed time for reflection and discussion. Families would talk about the movie, debating plot points or favorite characters. Parents would sometimes have to explain things that confused younger children. These conversations were valuable, creating shared family memories and interpretations. For couples, the drive home was often charged with unspoken meaning. The evening was ending, but the night wasn't necessarily over. Decisions might need to be made about whether to extend the date or head home. Things said or not said during the drive home could determine the future of a relationship. As you pulled into your driveway or dropped off friends at their houses, there was always a moment of adjustment. The spell of the evening was breaking. You were back to real life, back to your regular routine, back to tomorrow's responsibilities. But you were also bringing something back with you: memories, stories, a sense of having had an experience that was special and distinct from ordinary life. Drive-in theaters began declining in the 1980s and had largely disappeared by the 90s. Multiple factors contributed to their demise: the rise of VCRs and home video, the increasing value of the land they occupied, changing entertainment preferences, and the growth of multiplex cinemas. By the time Netflix arrived in the late 90s, and especially after it began streaming in 2007, the drive-in was already mostly a memory for those who'd experienced it. But what exactly did we lose when the drive-ins closed? It wasn't just a venue for watching movies, it was something more fundamental. We lost a form of public space that brought communities together without forcing intimacy. The drive-in allowed you to be social while maintaining privacy, to be part of a crowd while staying in your own bubble. This balance is rare. Most public spaces either require direct interaction or create complete anonymity. The drive-in existed in a middle ground that felt comfortable and natural. We lost an entertainment option that was accessible to families with young children. Taking small kids to an indoor theater is stressful. They might cry, they might need to use the bathroom, they might get bored and restless. Parents spend more time worried about disturbing others than enjoying the movie. The drive-in solved all these problems, making movies accessible to families who might otherwise skip them. We lost a courtship venue that was safer and more accessible than most alternatives. The drive-in gave teenagers a place to go on dates that felt grown-up, but wasn't too expensive or intimidating. It provided privacy without complete isolation, freedom within boundaries. When drive-ins closed, a valuable rung on the ladder of teenage social development disappeared. We lost one of the last remaining forms of entertainment that couldn't be rushed. In our modern world, we're always hurrying, always multitasking, always looking for efficiency. The drive-in demanded time. You had to commit to the full evening. You couldn't check your phone or browse other options. You had to be present, patient, and willing to let the experience unfold at its own pace. We lost a connection to seasonal rhythms and outdoor life. The drive-in was inherently a summer activity in most climates. It connected entertainment to the natural world, to weather and stars and fresh air. When we moved entertainment entirely indoors and eventually onto screens we carry with us everywhere, we severed this connection to nature and seasons. We lost stories and shared memories. Drive-in experiences became touchstones in people's lives, markers of time and development. People remember their first drive-in movie, their first drive-in date, taking their own children to drive-ins they'd attended as kids. These memories were rich and multi-layered because the experience itself was rich and multi-layered. Netflix doesn't create these kinds of memories. It's too convenient, too disposable, too forgettable. Netflix is remarkable technology. It gives us unprecedented access to content. It's convenient, affordable, and constantly available. On a purely practical level, it's superior to drive-in theaters in almost every measurable way. But it cannot replicate what drive-ins offered, because what drive-ins offered wasn't primarily about the movies themselves. It was about the totality of the experience, the ritual, the community, the adventure, the sensory richness, the social dynamics, the commitment of time and attention. The magic of drive-in theaters lay in their imperfection, their inefficiency, their demand that you meet them on their terms rather than adapt to your preferences. You had to drive there at a specific time. You had to watch what they were showing. You had to endure bad weather or technical problems. You had to be patient and present. These supposed limitations were actually features, not bugs. They created value through friction and constraint. They made the experience meaningful because it required effort and investment. They created memories because they engaged you fully, physically and socially and emotionally. When older generations talk about drive-in theaters with nostalgia, they're not just being sentimental about the past. They're recognizing that something of value has been lost, something that Netflix, for all its conveniences, cannot replace. They're mourning the loss of a particular kind of communal experience, a way of being together that felt natural and enriching. The drive-in represented a moment in time when technology and society aligned to create something special. The automobile gave families freedom and mobility. Movie making had matured into a popular art form. Suburbs were growing, creating communities that needed gathering places. The drive-in emerged to meet these conditions and created an experience that was unique and unrepeatable. Today, we have better technology, better movies, better convenience, but we don't have the magic. We don't have the anticipation of the journey, the warmth of the community, the richness of the full sensory experience, the adventure of an evening under the stars. We don't have the stories that come from imperfect, unpredictable, fully lived experiences. The drive-in theater was more magical than Netflix because it was more human. It acknowledged that we are not just brains that need content fed to them efficiently. We are bodies that exist in space. We are social creatures that need to gather. We are storytelling animals that create meaning through shared experience. We are beings that need ritual and rhythm and seasonal markers. Netflix gives us movies. The drive-in theater gave us something more. It gave us a way to be together, a reason to venture out into the night, a canvas on which to paint our own memories and meanings. That's not nostalgia. That's recognition of something essential that has been lost in our rush toward convenience and efficiency. The drive-in theater stands as a reminder that the best experiences are not necessarily the most convenient ones, that sometimes the journey matters more than the destination, that being present with others in physical space creates a kind of magic that technology alone cannot replicate, no matter how advanced it becomes. In remembering drive-in theaters fondly, we're not rejecting modernity or romanticizing the past. We're simply acknowledging that they offered something we still need, something we still miss, something that Netflix, for all its virtues, cannot provide. A reason to leave our houses, be with our neighbors, and share an experience that was bigger than any individual's private consumption. That was the magic. And yes, it was more magical than Netflix.